Hello, this video is going to show you how to make a shortbread recipe, and this shortbread recipe goes along with an American Girl doll, and her name is Addy. And Addy lived in the 1860s, and she lived in a time period called the Civil War. And Addy started out her life in North Carolina as an enslaved person, and she had to work as an enslaved person, and then she escaped and came up to Pennsylvania, and she and her mom escaped to begin with, and then her dad joined her later on. And so we're going to make in this video a recipe that she might have prepared. So we're going to start out with a couple of cups of flour, so 2 cups of flour. The way to measure flour is to take a spoon and scoop the flour into the cup, and then take something flat and level off the cup to make sure you have the right amount. And we're going to put 2 cups of flour into a sifter, and the sifter is going to break up any chunks that are in the flour. And during Addy's time period, flour was not as good quality as it is now. It was ground in machines that were not as regular as the ones we have now, and so we were putting it through a sifter to make sure that it didn't have any chunks in it and to break up anything in there. So if you do not have a sifter, you might have a strainer in your house, and that will work just fine for this. So you're going to add your flour to your sifter. We're also going to measure out a little bit of salt, and so sometimes you might see people pouring their salt into a measuring spoon over top of their stuff, and you don't want to do that. You always want to measure your salt in another container and then put it carefully measured into your recipe. So you're going to scoop up your salt into your measuring spoon, level it off, and put it in there. And then you take your sifter and then run the little crank through and sift all of your flour into your bowl. And we are using a wooden bowl because that is the type of bowl that Addy may have used. They also use pottery and things like that then. And you just sift all of your flour through there. Once you have your flour sifted, you're going to measure out your brown sugar. So to do that, you press the brown sugar into your measuring cup, and you want to press it in pretty hard. And you can use your fingers for this, so it's kind of fun. And it's going to clump up in there, and then you use your same flat knife to level that off, and then you add that into your bowl. And then you take your fingers and you mix that brown sugar all the way into your flour to where it is all completely mixed in and worked into the flour, and you can't see any clumps of the brown sugar. After that, you're going to take your butter, and you want your butter to be nice and cold. And you're going to take a butter knife and cut little pats, that's what the little flat pieces are called, little pats of butter, into your flour, brown sugar, salt mixture. And you want to kind of spread these out as you go. And this is to just kind of break this up. If you have a grater, you can get an adult to help you grate this into the flour mixture, because that will break it up a little bit easier and make the next part simpler. But you're just going to cut up all this butter into pieces so that it is easier to work into the rest of it. And then we're going to work this into the flour. Now you can use some forks for this. The recipe book says to use a pastry blender, but I don't have one of those because it's not something that I really like using. But sometimes it's a little bit easier to take your fingers and toss all of those little butter pieces around, and then you can use your fork to work this in. And that is just taking the fork and you're looking to break all those little pieces of butter up until it is mixed together. But this is going to take a really, really long time if you use your fork, so that is not my favorite way to do it. So the fork is going to take way too long, and so what I like to do is use my fingers. And using your fingers is really fun. You get to make a little bit of a mess, and it makes you feel kind of like you're playing around with it. But you're just going to work this around and try to work the butter into the flour until this becomes a dough. And while we are working on that, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about Addy and her story. So Addy is about 9 years old, and she started out her story in North Carolina, and she lived on a plantation. And she lived on a plantation being owned by a plantation owner, and during that time period, it was okay in this country for one person to be owned by another person. And the only reason that Addy was able to be owned by another person was because of the color of her skin. And most of us know now that that is really wrong and should not happen. And so during that time period, there were people that would help enslaved people leave those plantations and escape to states in the northern part of the country so that they could be free and not be owned by other people and live lives that were free. And so Addy was able to do that because Addy, as a 9-year-old little girl, was having to work on this plantation and do work in the tobacco fields instead of going to school and playing with her friends. And so she was able to escape with her mom, and then her father followed behind a little while later. And so she was able to live a life of freedom. And during the course of the books, President Lincoln wrote the Emancipation Proclamation, which led to the freedom for all slaves. And so that was a very, very good thing for our country. And hopefully we can continue to move forwards in that. So as you can see with our dough is starting to come together and be a little bit more like Play-Doh, and you want it to be a lot like Play-Doh. It's going to feel very mushy and very smooth, and so that's what you want it to be like. And you don't want there to be any big chunks of butter in there, so any of the big chunks of butter you're going to kind of work out and keep on moving that dough around until it is just smooth and all comes together. And then after you have got it all into one nice ball, you're going to grab yourself a pan, and we don't have to grease this pan. Sometimes when you bake things, you have to put some oil or some butter or some cooking spray into the pan so that it doesn't stick to it, but we don't have to do that with this because there's lots of butter in this recipe, and that's going to keep it from sticking. And so you press all of your dough into your pan and try to get it as even as you can, and have it all be the same thickness all the way around. And this is really fun. It's just like playing with Play-Doh. And then once you do that, I don't like to have fingerprints in the top of it, but so I smooth it out with a spoon. But if you want to, you can even like write your initials in the top of it or make a shape in the top of it with your fingers once you smooth it out. So there's all sorts of fun things you can do with the top of it, and then you can see if it shows up after it's baked. And then you're going to bake it at 350 degrees for about 20 minutes. So this is an old-fashioned cookie from a long time ago, and so it might not be like the chocolate chip cookies and things that you're used to now and the Oreos, but it tastes really good, and it's something that you can share with your family. And I hope that you can try it and try out a recipe that someone like Addy would have made back in the time period of the Civil War. Thank you so much for watching this video, and let me know if you try it in the comments, if your parents can help you comment, and keep on watching for more videos that will share some stories of American girls and what they like to cook.